On AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. We tackled this a bit earlier in the program, but I want to revisit it for the purposes of getting some comments from our next guest. And that is George Will's appearance on Bill Maher over the weekend. When asked about Mamdani, Zoran Mamdani, the mayor-elect, ostensibly, in New York City. What do you make of this coming to pass? And George Will is pretty excited about Mayor Mamdani. He explains why.
And on the other side, you have the guy running in New York, Mamdani, right? Okay, who's like a straight-up communist. I mean, he is. He talks about, the things that communists say. I mean, he wants free grocery stores, free buses.
I want him to win.
You want him to win?
Yeah. I think every 20 years or so.
Wait.
We need every 20 years or so, we need a conspicuous, confined experiment with socialism so we can crack it up again. Socialist slogan used to be, workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains. The new socialist slogan is, trust us, this time it won't be a mess. So, when the post-war Labour government in Britain was about to get started, one of their leading lights was a socialist named Nurian Bevan. He said, what could go wrong? He said, we have a nation bedded on coal, surrounded by fish. It would take an organizational genius to have a shortage of either. In 3 years, they had a shortage of both. That's socialism.
Yeah, just as Milton Friedman predicted, if you put the government in charge of the Sahara Desert in 3 days, it would run out of sand. Is the point. But I guess the question is this such an isolated, contained experiment with socialism that we need once every couple of decades? For more on this, Christopher Whalen joins us, chairman of the Whalen Global Advisors, editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst, author of Inflated, Money, Debt, and the American Dream, second edition. Chris, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. Greetings from California.
Oh, boy, from bad to worse. I know you're not in city proper anymore, but do you share George Will's give them what they want and good and hard approach?
Well, I agree with George. It's always good to have a socialist win so we can watch them fail miserably. His thesis is correct. But I think it's a much bigger event we're seeing here in New York, which is, the capital of progressive socialism in America. My ancestors helped build a lot of it. They were sandhogs, bridges, tunnels, that sort of thing. And now we're seeing the impact of inflation make New York City really unaffordable for many people. If you're not making a couple $100,000 a year, I would argue you should not be in New York City. It's just too expensive. So, we will always have people say, I can help you. And that's the whole Mamdani thing. He wants a rent freeze. He wants a lot of other apparently popular proposals to be put into effect. But they're not going to do anything to change the reality, which is that it's extremely expensive to live in Manhattan. I'll give you the metric that I think is most telling. The New York City Housing Authority charges about $1,500 a month for an apartment. It costs them $5,000 a month to provide that apartment. So the city's losing a couple $1,000s on every resident. And they have 500,000 of these apartments.
It sounds like a classic Soviet-style enterprise. How are you gonna make money? Volume?
Yeah, but remember, New York City 100 years ago was basically for the rich. The poor lived in the environs. And now that the progressives have tried to make everything in New York free, and that you hear that constantly from Mondami, right? That's supposed to help, but it's not, because the problem is that they're not making enough money. Their income is too low, and you just cannot force people to live in such squalor. You know, New York City is the biggest slumlord in the world. Look at it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But, I mean, unlike Chicago or most other major cities, New York City has a city income tax that layers on to the state and federal income taxes. And the prospect that there will be an increase in that, and just sort of the general chaos that would come if Mamdani implemented the policies he's promoting, you're going to see continued flight of capital and productivity, aren't you?
You are, but the interesting thing about the New York area is that while it's absolutely true that many people have been leaving the state and moving to Florida and places like this, there's still a huge influx of people who think that New York is a great place and that there's opportunity there. You know, I had moved out of New York City back in 2021 with my wife. We live up in Westchester County, which is one of the most affluent areas of the United States, and we still cut our expenses in half, Dan. Half. So, you know, I believe we should be evacuating New York City. We should be resettling low-income families into communities up and down the Hudson River where we have transportation and services and schools, and try and improve their lives instead of trying to pack them in tighter and tighter. That's the solution in New York. And it's very striking because just like Chicago, imagine how big a building in New York has to be, how many square feet for it to work financially, okay? That's stuff that was built 100 or 150 years ago, beautiful old buildings, right? They're just too small because you can't charge enough money to make them work. That to me is the issue. Inflation is driving the tilt back towards socialism in America, and it's important for conservatives to understand this.
But the flip side is, you know, we did that with scattered site Section 8 housing in Chicago when the projects came down, and the city disproportionately distributed the residents of those housing projects to, like, South suburban Chicago, which just destroyed the city, which destroyed those suburbs, I should say. I mean, you had people that weren't socialized to be homeowners, frankly. They didn't have, you know, they have no stake in the game. And this is not a race thing, because if you go back and look at articles in the Chicago Tribune from the 60s and 70s, really at the tip of this, it accelerated a couple of decades later. You have residents of Roseland, south side of Chicago, which was a middle-income, largely black suburb, but they were stakeholders and homeowners, and they were the ones, residents of neighborhoods like Roseland, saying, don't send, you know, the public housing project residents to us because they're going to destroy our community. So it wasn't a race thing. It's an independence thing. It's a responsibility thing. And so the idea of sort of making the city's problems the region's problems is something Chicago has done too, but it hasn't been really to the benefit of the region, or at least significant parts of it.
D.C., where I grew up, exactly the same thing you just described.
In D.C., you said?
Oh, yeah, very much. You know, 40 plus years ago, you had the middle class black professionals moving out to Prince George's County and Montgomery County. And what's left in D.C. is what Donald Trump is dealing with today.
Right.
But, you know, an interesting thing, we were going to also talk about the prospective release of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac from government conservatorship. They may sell the multifamily apartment buildings that are financed by those two entities before they take them out for a public offering. That's going to be very interesting, because I'm not sure that those assets are saleable at all.
You can't make them. You can't make the numbers work on those assets.
No, and you know they're cutting back on Section 8, which you just mentioned. You know, the new subprime in real estate are apartment buildings, not single-family homes. And they are just barely financeable. New York City has a terrible problem in this regard, and I think it's only going to get worse, because if you hold those assets and you see Mondami coming in as the next mayor, they have zero value. There are several banks in New York City that could easily fail if this man wins the mayor's race. So
Interesting.
Think about that.
So multifamily homes and Fannie and Freddie trying to get those off their balance sheet before they go public. That could be a contagion.
That's right. $500 billion, by the way. Big number.
And one of the big boys that are buying up single family homes and I assume multifamily as well wouldn't come in and take them for a song.
No, because even if you get them at 25 cents on the dollar of the original, the last valuation, it still may not work. If you can't raise rent to keep up with your operating expenses, it does not work. And this is the terrible tragedy that faces many low-income families in these cities, which is that they don't have the ability to increase their income, and yet the landlord is sitting there with operating costs that go up every day. Most of the buildings in New York City are unionized, so all the staff, is expecting a salary bump every year, and it just kind of snowballs from there.
And so, like this is sort of we're using New York as the microcosm, but this is a conversation about big city America, which we have often on this show, given we're in Chicago. So, I mean, what do you see as the way out? Is it a bottoming out, a la Detroit?
No, I think you have to go back to market pricing for all real estate, and then you have to subsidize it selectively to help people who, for example, have banged up credit but are working. You have families out there in my community. I live in Austin, right on the Hudson River. That's where Sing Sing is, by the way. And it's a wonderful community. It was originally Italian and Portuguese. Now it's Latino. They work their asses off. They build businesses. They are out every day hustling. And that's what we need to encourage. That's how you improve people's lives.
So it's like the Aspen model, right? You can't have a workforce can't live there, so you set up subsidized housing, like townhomes and stuff, not far from the downtown, and you subsidize to incomes up to like $400,000. I mean, it's crazy, but that's what you do because these are productive people. They're integral to the enjoyment of Aspen, and so these are the deals that you make.
Yeah, and I'll give you another example. The progressives, especially during the Biden administration, were constantly trying to force Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to do what they call mission lending, low-income lending. But that's insane. Nobody who has a low-income situation who's looking for their first mortgage, a starter home, first-time home buyer, right, would ever go anywhere except the FHA. Because at the FHA, they don't risk price you based on income. They don't play that game. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are for the middle class. They subsidize middle class home ownership, the building, realtors, all of the components of the housing complex are subsidized by them. But they're no good at all when it comes to addressing low-income housing needs. Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You have even the likes of Tiny Dancer, that would be Rahm Emanuel, a translation there for you, writing in the Washington Post about what's depressing America's young men, and he describes two overlapping problems as he's trying to position himself to run for president here, and he's trying to appeal to the 18 to 25-year-old MAGA men that the Dems can't seem to crack. The U.S. is too.
Pritzker?
Yeah, could be. Wouldn't that be fun? The U.S. has two overlapping problems.
Love that.
The housing crisis.
Look,
go ahead.
Yeah, they'll destroy the Democratic Party between Mondami and Pritzker. That'll be great to watch.
No, it will be. But Rahm argues two overlapping problems: the housing crisis and despondency in young men. And of course, he argues that the former contributes to the latter because they can't put down a stake in society right now and feel like they're, independent and can support a family and provide. They're providers because a house is outside their reach.
That's right. But, as much as I am delighted by the progress of President Trump, ultimately conservatives have to face facts that if we don't eliminate the budget deficit and deal with this with finality, we can't address inflation. And inflation is going to feed a growing socialist tendency in America. So I disagree with George Will in that regard.
That's not contained. That's the problem.
No. It affects everyone.
Where do you think the economy is in terms of its vitality? A lot of argument about the GDP number that was out last week, and the phony baloney jobs numbers, and so forth. But just because of, I don't know, foreign direct investment, rebalancing of trade relationships, the animal spirits that have been unleashed through deregulation, that we're going to be doing okay for the foreseeable future. What's your view?
I think the economy is still running hot because of the deficit spending and some other factors. Interest rates have certainly had an impact on housing, negative impact. But I think overall we're a long way from falling off the edge of the table. A lot of people keep predicting some apocalyptic turn in the economy. I don't see that. I think we're just going to kind of muddle along and go sideways, simply because, again, there's so much cash in the markets today. If you saw some of the things that I watch in the market for credit, assets that nobody should even look at, Dan, but they're being bought hand over fist. I believe right now, if Donald Trump wants to raise not $30 billion, but a couple $100 billion, they should buy back all of Fannie and Freddie's common voting shares and issue preferred. Because what do people want right now? They want income. They want certainty, to your point, right? And so, give the market what they want. I don't see a big economic crash on the horizon, though.
But you see the trend lines that have been manifest over the last, since COVID, let's say, continuing in terms of a flight to quality and the distribution away from big cities and blue states, frankly.
Yeah, think about what I was saying before. I lived on Central Park South. I was in a rental. I didn't want to buy a crazy apartment for $4 or $5 million. And moving out to Westchester County, I live across the road from Sleepy Hollow Country Club, which is one of the most beautiful parts of America, the Hudson Valley. And we cut our expenses more than in half and bought a house. So I think that's the answer for working families. Get them into a place where they can actually put down stakes, as you said. That's how you start to turn this around.
Chris Whalen, chairman of Whalen Global Advisors, editor of the Institutional Risk Analyst, and author of Inflated: Money, Debt, and the American Dream, second edition. Chris, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, guys.
You too, and Chris Whalen joins us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.